Happy Wednesday, everybody. I hope you are having a good day so far and have had a good start to your week. There are some, there's one story that I saw yesterday that finally we have an answer to something that I think we were all curious as to why we hadn't learned this before and why this has not been an answer that was given by anybody in Congress. I believe that this was found out through just looking at pictures and figuring out who this certain person was, and then looking at other pictures and identifying the same types of things on this person that gives us an identity. People have been really looking into this to figure out what had happened. We've all been wanting to know who shot and killed Ashley Babbitt at the Capitol, and they wouldn't release the identity. So I know some people, there was a guy who was on Slightly Offensive with Elijah Schaefer saying that they had been doing some facial recognition and really looking into it, and they were pretty sure that they knew who it was. And now there is a story out, and we know who did it. Um, he's been identified as Michael Leroy Bird. Now, I got this article on the deplorablepatriot.com. That is not where I first saw this article, but there are pictures. If you want to go look it up, just go to the deplorablepatriot.com, and you can see pictures that were taken in um, in the room where they were barricaded, and they match what he was wearing on his wrist, on his gun wrist, to the hand that you see through the window when he shot. And he has this bracelet on that is the same as the bracelet of just the hand that you see coming out of that window of that door. So, this article was written by Jazz McKay. Now, the question is, this particular article was written on May 17th of 2021, and here we are now in the first week of July. Why haven't we heard about it? Why is no one else talking about it? Because I just now was seeing this on Facebook yesterday or Instagram. I can't remember where I saw the story. It might have been Instagram. But nobody's talked about it. So unless you were actively seeking this answer, you wouldn't have heard about it. So let's read the article. It says, last month, this is the guy who was on Slightly Offensive. Last month, independent journalist Taylor Hanson made a surprising announcement. He had identified the Capitol police officer who shot and killed an unarmed woman, Ashley Babbitt, during the Capitol protests of January 6th. Well, he had tweeted out, the identity of Ashley Babbitt's shooter is Lieutenant Michael Leroy Bird. Multiple mainstream media outlets have known this, but they refuse to run the story. Why is that? Um, so I think the image at the top of this article, there's some writing about the top image, and it says Mike Bird clearly has no trigger discipline and was pointing his firearm at his colleagues directly prior to gunning down Ashley Babbitt. I also wonder what he's clutching in his left hand. And he does have something in his left hand. I can't tell if it's a box or papers. I don't know. But he's clutching onto that pretty tightly. And then for the next picture, it's just USCP Lieutenant Michael Bird, commander of the House chamber. So I guess he's kind of over, people in the House, the top person for that. I don't know. So in this composite, you can clearly see the pistol in Lieutenant Bird's hand on the House floor is the same type Glock Model 20 that was used to murder Ashley Babbitt, and the bracelet Lieutenant Byrd is wearing is also a match. I don't know exactly what kind of gun they're talking about because in the other article I saw it said a Glock 22. Um, and not that I know much about types of guns. I don't even know if that's an actual type of gun. My dad questioned that, so I also question whether that's an actual type of gun. According to Hansen, the picture to the left was taken from Mike Bird's LinkedIn. He has since been almost completely scrubbed from the internet. It's also worth noting all the major media outlets, including FNC, Newsmax, etc., has had access to this information and done nothing with it. I wonder why that is. We couldn't confirm the shooter's identity and these allegations, but we do know this. Mike Bird is currently not working and is not staying at his residence either. Also, this isn't the first time that Lieutenant Michael Leroy Byrd has been involved in a situation where he made headlines after getting in trouble. According to Fox News, back in 2019, a U.S. Capitol police officer was under review after somehow left his Glock 22 pistol inside the bathroom of the structure's visitor center. My question is, how does that happen? And number two, why was your gun out in the first place? What were you doing? So, from Fox News, they said Lieutenant Mike Bird forgot to take the weapon with him upon leaving the restroom, and it was found during a routine security sweep later in the day, officials told Roll Call. The department takes these matters very seriously and has a very thorough process to investigate and review incidents such as these and holds personnel accountable for their actions, Capitol Police spokeswoman Eva Malecki said. Following the investigation's conclusion, appropriate actions will be taken in accordance with the department's official policies and procedures. Byrd is the leader of the House Chambers section of the department and was reportedly back on the job in the days after the incident. He allegedly told his colleagues he will be treated differently because of his rank, sources told Roll Call, although it wasn't immediately clear what he may have meant by the comment. Well, I would assume because he's the leader of the House Chamber, he thinks that he gets special privileges even when he screws up. According to the Daily Wire, Babbitt's family plans to sue Capitol Police for her murder. This is from the Daily Wire, and it says an attorney for the family of fatally shot Trump supporter Ashley Babbitt detailed plans Monday to sue Capitol Police on behalf of the Babbitt family, arguing that the officer in question has not been charged for alleged use of excessive force because of the politics surrounding the case. Babbitt, 35, was unarmed when she was shot on January 6 by Capitol Police during the breach of the Capitol. She died of a gunshot wound to the left shoulder, according to the D.C. Medical Examiner's Office. The Department of Justice announced earlier this month that the officer who fatally shot Babbitt will not be charged in her death. Attorney Terry Roberts told Newsmax on Monday that Babbitt has not received justice due to the politics of the case and her open support for former President Donald Trump. The attorney will be pursuing a civil action on behalf of the family alleging a violation of Babbitt's constitutional rights, he said. Quote, I'm handling the civil action that will be filed. That's my role. The family and I were disappointed in the Department of Justice's decision on this, but my role is really to bring a civil action and in that way vindicate her rights. End quote. We think the evidence is ample and supports criminal charges against the officer, claiming the officer could see Babbitt was not armed and offered her no warning. This is a situation in which the officer could have easily arrested her if he had grounds to arrest her without using deadly force. So this was an egregious act of excessive force and he should have been charged. At the very least, he should be charged for criminal negligence because if you go look at the picture that I'm talking about, you don't keep your hand on the trigger of your gun unless you're about to use it. And at this point, this picture that is taken, he's further in the room. The only thing that is around him are other Capitol Police members. So why is his hand on the trigger already? That doesn't make sense. And that's a dangerous move. So, at the very least, maybe he just does have terrible trigger discipline and he didn't actually mean to shoot. but he was just being negligent. I, I doubt it. I feel like it was done on purpose. Um, I feel like he felt like he had the right to shoot somebody who was unarmed. And I think we all know the reason why he hasn't been charged. Number one, it was a Trump supporter that died. And everybody seems to think that Trump supporters deserve death when it happens. And, well, I wouldn't say everybody, but I'm sure there's some people that think she got what she deserved. And also, he's black and she was white. There you go. That's open and shut of why we haven't ever learned through Congress or the Capitol Police who it was that shot her and why he's not being charged. And he's obviously probably being secluded in an undisclosed location for his protection, especially now that people know who it is. He's probably not very safe if he's not being protected. I'm not saying that it would be right for anybody to go and vindicate Ashley Babbitt on her behalf and harm this man. No one should ever do that. But I would not doubt that if someone had, knew who he was and saw him out, that someone might try to hurt him for what he did. Because there are extremists on both sides that would do something stupid like that. But it's not worth ruining your life to try and gain justice, which it wouldn't be, but what they would believe to be justice for Ashley Babbitt. It's not worth it. It's just not worth it. People that seem to get away with things and you wonder where's the justice, you have to remember that while they may not receive justice here on earth, they do receive that after death at some point. And they may receive it here on earth through other means other than through the justice system. That's the other thing you have to think about. I here it is. Let's see. So is back in November last year when I got robbed. Never found out who it was. I have never heard back from either of the detectives that were supposedly working on my case. And not for lack of trying to reach out to them to see if there just by chance something came up and maybe they had some kind of, you know, idea. Because there were other robberies that took place in that area not long after. So at about I think there were two, maybe three other places that were robbed around that same time, and they had cameras, whereas my store did not. But still, I've heard nothing. But I don't worry about it because whether or not he ever gets caught and I ever know about it, I know that he will get what he deserves one way or the other. That's it. So you can't take that step into your own hands. The thing you gotta do is you just gotta let God handle it, and He will do what He deems fit for people who do things that are bad. Continuing on. The feds refuse to charge Mike Bird, so the family is forced to seek justice on their own, and I hope they sue him personally as well as the department. It's interesting that Mr. Bird's lawyer, Mark Schammel, is also a Biden donor who represents Igor Danchenko, the primary subsource of the discredited Steele dossier on Trump. That tells you all you need to know about this douche. Just quoting the article. Bird should be hauled out of his hidey hole and forced to face the Babbitts in court. When progressive radical terrorists stormed into the state capital of Iowa, Wisconsin, and Georgia, none of them were shot. When radical left-wing mobs tried to break down the door to the SCOTUS while Brett Kavanaugh was sworn in, no one was shot. Antifa and BLM thugs riot, murder, burn, loot, and assault in Portland, Seattle, Minneapolis, and Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, without the media calling them terrorists and demanding incarceration or death. But all you have to do is look at Tyler Hansen's Twitter page and see the vile comments these scumlords make with no consequences to understand the double standard we're dealing with. In America today, a black police officer shooting an unarmed white conservative woman seems to have different criteria than a white cop shooting a drugged up felon resisting arrest. When the narrative suits them, leftists transform into apologists for police murder and the corruption of the cover up. There's a two-tiered system of justice in America, one for Democrats and radical Marxists, and one for everyone else. Absolutely. That's exactly what it is. Um, so yeah, there you go. Lieutenant Michael Leroy Byrd. So I think we should all demand that he be charged, at the very least, like I said, with um, criminal negligence. But continuing on with speaking about the riots and everything like that, Michael Knowles wrote an article called How the Looters Got Away with It. It's an opinion piece, but I was curious to see what he had to say. So let's read. Prosecutors in Manhattan and the Bronx have recently liberated hundreds of justice involved youths who face potential legal consequences for their participation last year in mostly peaceful protests aimed at dismantling systems of oppression. It's funny that he would use justice involved youths. I just started reading his new book, Speechless: Controlling Words, Controlling Minds, and he talked about the left's ability to change words or use euphemisms to change meanings. And he talked about how we no longer call people criminals, we call them justice involved, to take away the stigma of the fact that they did something wrong, their choices led them down that road. And with the euphemism justice involved, it's giving the idea that they're victims and they had no choice in what happened. I know he's using it ironically. I get that. Anyway, if you don't speak woke, the new name for the same old scourge of political correctness, all that piffle means the city let looters off the hook. Meanwhile, prosecutors are preparing to hold insurrectionists and traitors accountable for their attempted coup d'etat at the Capitol on January 6th. Or, in English, the feds are throwing the book at trespassers and horn helmets who made a mess of Nancy Pelosi's desk and stole her lectern. The power of political correctness lies not merely in what leftists insist we cannot say, but also what they make us say instead. Polite societies use euphemisms. We refer to old women as women of a certain age. We mourn those who have passed away rather than those who died. In prior ages, ladies went to powder their nose and still used the bathroom or the restroom rather than the toilet. Those euphemisms soften harsh realities, but they don't contradict them. The old woman is indeed a woman of a certain age. The poetical passing away describes the spiritual fact of death. Women may indeed powder their noses after they've done whatever else they would do in rooms that often include a bath and in which anyone might rest. Political correctness goes further, not merely softening reality, but inverting it, a process I describe in my new book, Speechless. Oh, okay. I just talked about it. A justice involved youth, formerly known as a juvenile delinquent, is not involved with justice but rather injustice, no matter how the woke wordsmiths want to spin him. Yet one can no longer call a spade a spade. One can hardly even utter the phrase to call a spade without being accused of racism by the most excitable speech police. These linguistic enforcers punish perpetrators of political incorrectness through cancel culture, but they focus most of their efforts on making sure transgressions never take place at all. Um, I don't know if that's Brandeis, if that's how you say it. University's Prevention Advocacy and Resource Center offers an extensive, if not exhaustive, oppressive language list to warn students, faculty, and staff of which words to avoid and how they ought to replace them. Park recognizes that language is a powerful tool that can be used to perpetuate oppression. The center begins without the slightest hint of self awareness. Brandeis sorts the tabooed terms into 5 categories: violent language, identity based language, culturally appropriative language, person first alternatives, and language that doesn't say what we mean. The latter category is the most amazing because it ironically describes the entire project of political correctness. Using euphemisms, vagueness, and inaccurate words can get in the way of meaningful dialogue. The Oblivious Center warns before instructing readers to replace clear language with vague euphemisms. Himself and herself must become the illiterate themselves. Female identifying, itself a concession to woke ideology, now becomes simply woman, even if the female identifying individual is a man. A homeless person, Brandeis informs us, should now be called a person experiencing housing insecurity, a phrase that doubles down on the denial of moral agency once acknowledged in tramps and bums. No reasonable person objects to mercy for peaceful protesters or when women in the ladies' room, but descriptors be damned, the protesters in question aren't peaceful and the ladies aren't women. The left can censor speech with its institutional power in classrooms, boardrooms, media platforms, and the halls of government. More insidious still, leftists can redefine our very perception of reality by smuggling in whole premises through the subtle transformation of the words that make us say encouraging cacophony while they steal our capacity for meaningful speech. Um, so the whole point that the reason they do this, and what I had read in his book too, is that when they change the language and the meaning, it only works for so long before it starts revealing the true reality, and they have to go back in and they have to do it again. So he took the example of the word gay, which actually means happy, and how in the 90s they started using gay to refer to homosexuals because homosexual was a harsh reality that you're not normal or something. I don't really remember exactly how I explained that. So they started using the word gay, but that only covered the reality of what they were trying to make it mean for so long before then they started implementing the word queer, which actually means strange. So these words that they say that they're not politically correct, we can't use them anymore because they're offensive. Well, they weren't offensive. The left used these words to describe something that they didn't mean and made them offensive and have these negative connotations because they ascribed new meaning to them. If they had never taken the words gay and queer and ascribed them to homosexuals, people would still use them today and not think about a homosexual person. They would be used as what they were actually used for, happy and strange. Same with the word retard, which means slow. People used to use that all the time and no one had a problem with it until recently. Now all of a sudden it's offensive. You can't use it. So my thing is just stop following the left's rules of language. Continue to use the words you've always used. Use them the way that they are intended to have been used for their original meanings. So if you want to say, yeah, I had a gay day today, then what you actually mean is you had a happy day. And maybe you all have to let people know that you are using words as their intended meanings so people don't misunderstand you because they're not going to be doing that. But I think if we started actually using language the way it was intended to be used and stop falling for the trap of the left and subscribing to their new language, maybe things could change because they couldn't hide behind these word changes and meaning changes anymore, which is what they do. So, I would highly suggest you read his book. It's really good. I'm only 6 chapters in, but it's a really good book. And the one thing I like about the way Michael Knowles writes is compared to like Ben Shapiro. When I was reading How to Destroy what is it? How to Destroy America in 3 Easy Steps. when I was reading that, I had to look up a lot of words to find out their meaning. I was doing a lot of vocabulary research because he speaks in a way that's above me. I'm not as highly educated as Ben Shapiro. I don't have college degrees. So some words that he uses, I'm like, I don't even know what the heck he's talking about. So I have to look it up so I can understand it because I want to understand what I'm reading. I don't want to just read it for the sake of reading it. And with Michael Knowles, I had to look up a couple of words already, but by this point with Ben Shapiro's book, I'd already probably looked up like 25 words. So I like how, not dumbed down, but it's written in a way that people who maybe aren't as educated can clearly understand what he's trying to say. And the words that I had looked up through context clues around it, I was pretty sure I knew what they meant, but I looked them up just to make sure I was right. So, I feel like if you're reading and you come across a word you don't know and you can't figure it out through context clues, you should look it up. Know what you're reading because then you learn. So, that's just, a little spiel about that. Um, really quickly, let's talk about over the holiday weekend, right? I had told my dad that I thought over the holiday weekend there would be around 100 people shot in Chicago. Because usually over the holidays, that's when a lot of shootings happen. I was not correct. It was not quite 100, but there were 88 people shot in Chicago. I think it was 14 died, and the youngest victim was a 6-year-old girl who was shot while standing in a group on a sidewalk. This is from Fox News, written by Peter Atkin. It says Chicago saw an incredibly violent holiday weekend as July 4th saw around 88 people shot, including over a dozen killed in crimes across the city. Police reported dozens of incidents from Friday through Sunday, with victims ranging in age from 12 to 30. Chicago Alderman Anthony um, Napolitano called the city a war zone and slammed local leaders for the increase in crime. The Chicago Police Department tweeted photos of guns confiscated during Sunday celebrations. The cache included shotguns and rifles, along with a number of pistols. Wow, a lot of guns, man. Reports on the total number of incidents ranged wildly from 37 to 88, but the fact remains that dozens of people were shot, with at least 5 children among the victims. The low end figure from NBC5 Chicago includes 9 deaths in its 37 shootings, while the Chicago Sun-Times counts 14 deaths in its 88 shootings. The youngest victim was a 6-year-old girl who was shot while standing in a group on a sidewalk at around 1 a.m. Monday. A gray SUV pulled up and someone opened fire on the group, hitting a 43-year-old woman twice in the back as well as a little girl. Both are expected to recover. At around the same time, a 12-year-old girl and a 13-year-old boy were shot around 1:05 a.m. Monday in Washington Park. At least 4 people were wounded as well in the drive-by shooting. The girl was taken to the hospital in critical condition. A 21-year-old man suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head and was pronounced dead on arrival at the University of Chicago Medical Center. A 26-year-old man died after a gunshot wound to the torso. 2 men were sitting in their car at a stoplight when someone walked up and started shooting at them. One man was shot twice in the torso and 3 times in the back. He was pronounced dead at the hospital. The other man was shot in the leg and stabilized at the hospital. In addition to the dozens of civilians injured in shootings over the weekend, 2 police officers were injured in a shooting early Monday while dispersing crowds. A police commander and a sergeant were wounded and taken to a hospital. The commander was struck in his foot and the sergeant was grazed on the leg. A 33-year-old man was taken into custody in relation to the shooting of a group on the west side late Sunday night, but few suspects have been otherwise apprehended. Police provided little information about any suspects in the meantime. And not only did all of this take place, but across the country, and I think it was like New York and Detroit, around 184 people shot over the weekend. Um, in fact, we're just gonna look it up. I saw this on Facebook. So this one says 150, but let's just pull it up and look at it. 150 fatally shot, more than 400 shootings nationwide.
This is a Fox News alert now on a violent holiday weekend. Nearly 100.
Sorry. So in New York City, at least 35 people were shot in 29 shooting incidents from Friday through Monday, with at least 2 of the incidents resulting in deaths. Overall, at least 4 murders occurred in the city. During the same period last year, NYPD recorded 55 shooting incidents, 78 shooting victims, and 16 homicides. In Chicago, 100 people were struck by gunfire, resulting in 18 deaths since Friday night. Is this? Yeah, 23 hours ago. According to Chicago police. In nearly all of the cases, no suspects were taken into custody as detectives continue to investigate the incidents. 69 of more than 450 nationwide shootings occurred in Chicago alone. Well, I thought that. Okay, in Cleveland, 11 people were reported shot in a 5-hour period from Sunday into early Monday. Throughout the holiday weekend, 17 were reportedly shot in total across the city. None of the shootings resulted in deaths. Meanwhile, in Akron, Ohio, police said 2 people were killed in separate shootings. Denver police reported that 5 separate shootings occurred within a 4-hour period beginning just after 11 p.m. Sunday. Police said the 5 victims appeared to suffer non-life-threatening injuries. In Georgia, a manhunt is underway for a suspect who allegedly shot and killed golf pro Eugene Siller at Pine Tree Country Club in Atlanta on Saturday afternoon after driving a pickup truck on the green of the golf course's 10th hole. 2 more bodies have been discovered in the bed of the truck. In Texas, a Houston police officer was among at least 4 victims shot in separate incidents across the city on Monday. While police said the officer was expected to recover, no details were immediately released on the other shooting victims. A shooting in Fort Worth, Texas left 8 people wounded shortly after 1:30 a.m. Sunday when someone fired multiple shots near a car wash, with some of the victims returning fire. Over on Geddes Avenue in Horn Street. I know exactly where that's at. It's a very, very bad part of town. Police said that the victims were taken to hospitals and are in stable condition. No suspects are in custody. Shootings and other violent crimes have been on the rise in major cities across the country over the past several weeks. To combat the spike, the Department of Justice is launching new strike force teams to target illegal gun trafficking in New York City, Chicago, Los Angeles, the San Francisco Bay Area, and Washington, D.C. So I didn't even know about these shootings in Fort Worth. This is actually news to me. Um, but this is what happens when you do what the Democrats have done, which is demonize police, defund the police, and allow crime to run rampant and not punish anybody or give anyone consequences for their actions if they align with your political side. This is what happens. So it's getting ridiculous, and someone really needs to put a stop to it. That's all there is to it. It's got to be stopped. Trying to think, what do I want to talk about? No, not that one. Okay, so there's apparently 3 Biden scandals that we're not hearing about, and I was curious as to what those are because, I mean, sure, he has a lot of scandals. This was written by Ben Johnson at the Daily Wire. So, number one, Joe Biden reportedly met with Hunter Biden's business partners. Emails and photographs retrieved from Hunter Biden's laptop appear to show that then Vice President Joe Biden met repeatedly with his son's business associates, raising issues of influence peddling. A photograph shows the then sitting vice president meeting with Hunter and two business associates, Carlos Slim and Jeff Cooper, on November 19, 2015. The New York Post Miranda Devine reports that Hunter had spent much of that year pursuing Slim to invest in a number of business options, including Cooper's online gambling platform, Ocho Gaming. Um, this would be at least the second meeting Biden allegedly attended with his son's foreign business connections while vice president. He reportedly met his son's business associates from Ukraine, Russia, Kazakhstan at a dinner in Washington, D.C. on April 16, 2015. Yeah, I already read about that one. Okay, number two, the scandals plaguing first brother Fast Jimmy Biden. It's become a national tradition for Democratic presidents to have shady brothers, from Billy Carter to Roger Clinton to Ted Kennedy. But each of those figures caused their siblings far greater media embarrassment with fewer scandals than first brother James Biden. The 46th president's younger brother has raised the practice of grift to a fine art. After taking over a global investing firm in 2006, Jim Biden told the company brass, "Don't worry about investors. We've got people all around the world who want to invest in Joe Biden." James Biden made it clear he viewed the fund as a way to make money from rich foreigners who could not legally give money to his older brother or his campaign account. No other presidential sibling tried to leverage their brother to cash in on Americans suffering from the wasting disease of cancer. When Jim Biden sought to invest in integrate oral care in November 2018, Politico reports that Jim allegedly told the company he could get his brother's Biden Cancer Initiative to promote the oral rinse that integrates cells for use by cancer patients. Ugh. Hillstone, um, 7 months after he became executive vice president of the fairly new entrant into home building, he struck out through his charmed life. Seasons Change nightclub. Okay. The New Jersey based Hillstone International. Hillstone won a $1.5 billion contract from the Obama administration to build housing in Iraq. While the media presented the business deals of President Donald Trump's children as an impeachable violation of the Constitution's emoluments clause, they have hardly reported the name of Jim Biden, much less his virtually confessed lifelong history of profiting off his brother's office. Nepotism in the Biden administration. The Biden administration is also a family affair when it comes to appointments. High-level Biden appointees secured the hiring of numerous family members, according to the Washington Post. The little-known Biden aide Steve Ricchetti serves as a prime example, with three of his children serving in the executive branch. Politico reported on June 14th that J.J. Ricchetti will be a special assistant in the Office of Legislative Affairs. He joins his sister Shannon Ricchetti, who is a deputy associate director for the White House social secretary, and one of his brothers, Daniel Ricchetti, who is a senior advisor in the Office of the Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security. The problem? JJ's record of accomplishment consists primarily of graduating from college last year. That's it. The Treasury Department will lack the ideas and experiences that someone with a different background and probably better qualifications would have brought to the job. In years to come, the nation may miss out on that individual's contributions as yet another Ricchetti heir follows a predestined trajectory through the halls of power. Ricchetti has company. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has three relatives serving in the Biden administration. Brother Tom Sullivan is the State Department's Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy. Sister-in-law Rose Bauman Sullivan, Tom's wife, is HHS Acting Assistant Secretary for Legislation. And Jake's wife, Maggie Goodland, serves as a counsel to Attorney General Merrick Garland. The Donilon family also struck gold during the Biden years. Biden's senior advisor, Mike Donilon's niece, Sarah, is special assistant in the National Security Council's Asia Directorate, and the daughter of another Biden administration official, Presidential Personnel Office Director Kathy Russell. Mike Donnellan's brother Tom reportedly turned down consideration to become CIA director, remaining instead at the think tank of BlackRock Incorporated, which is also deeply embedded in the Biden administration. President Biden appointed Secretary of State Antony Blinken's wife, Evan Ryan, as White House Cabinet Secretary, which helps coordinate the various federal agencies. White House spokesperson Jen Psaki's sister, Stephanie Psaki, has been hired as an HHS senior advisor on human rights and gender equity inside the department's Office of Global Affairs. My gosh! Biden's senior advisor, Anita Dunn, is married to Bob Bauer, who co chairs the Presidential Commission on Packing the Supreme Court and runs an aggressive online fact checking effort called Building Back Together, which is tied to the Biden White House. Despite the abundant scent of nepotism, the media have largely ignored the story or dismissed it by engaging in whataboutism. The Washington Post reported merely that ethicists found it disappointing that Biden didn't shift even further from the practices of Donald Trump's presidency, which they thought reeked of nepotism and cronyism. These underreported Biden administration scandals share a common thread. President Joe Biden seems to give his family, his cronies, and their families advantages that the average American would never see. That's a story worth reporting. Yeah, I agree. Oh, I can't stand him. I just can't. So, moving on, because I have a lot to cover. I want to talk about the RNC vendor being hacked by the Russian military. This was after Biden and Putin met. Now, they failed to gain RNC data, supposedly, but this happened right after. So, Sinex, a contractor for the Republican Party, was allegedly hacked by the Russian military late last week in what is apparently the latest attack on U.S. entities during the Biden era. So I'm assuming that the RNC system wasn't listed on that list of 16 things that Russia absolutely could not hack, right? By the way, this was written by Ryan Saverdra. The hackers reportedly did not hack the Republican Party system. Russian hackers have previously attempted to launch cyber attacks against the Republican National Committee and failed. Russian hackers have succeeded in attacking the Democrat National Committee in the past. Early indications were that the culprit was Russia's SVR intelligence agency. The RNC attack was the second of apparent Russian origin to become public in the last few days, and it was unclear late Tuesday whether the two were related. RNC Chief of Staff Richard Walters told the Daily Wire in a statement that no data was accessed by the hackers and that the party is working with tech and federal law enforcement officials on the matter. Over the weekend, we were informed that is it Synax? Is that how they say it? A third-party provider had been breached. We immediately blocked all access from Synex accounts to our cloud environment. Our team worked with Microsoft to conduct a review of our systems, and after a thorough investigation, no RNC data was accessed. We will continue to work with Microsoft as well as federal law enforcement officials on this matter. The Times added, the twin attacks are a test for Mr. Biden just 3 weeks after he, in his first meeting as president with Mr. Putin, demanded that the Russian leader rein in ransomware activities against the U.S. At the meeting, Mr. Biden said later he presented Mr. Putin with a list of 16 critical sectors of the American economy that, if attacked, would provoke a response, though he was cagey about what that response would be. The newest attacks appeared to cross many lines that Mr. Biden has said he would no longer tolerate. On the campaign trail last year, he put Russia on notice that, as president, he would respond aggressively to counter any interference in American elections. Then in April, he called Mr. Putin to warn him about impending economic sanctions in response to the SolarWinds breach. Biden has repeatedly struggled to answer questions about the attacks on U.S. entities that have occurred on his watch. I can tell you a couple things. I received an update from my national security team this morning, Biden told reporters. It appears to have caused minimal damage to U.S. businesses, but we're still gathering information to the full extent of the attack. And I'm going to have more to say about this. In the next several days, we're getting more detailed information. That's what I can tell you now, and I feel good about our ability to, Biden then turned and left the press conference and did not answer questions on whether Russian President Vladimir Putin was testing him. This is the idiot that we deal with from day to day. And constantly avoiding answering questions or just trailing off in the middle of answering questions because, he saw something shiny and he lost track, whatever the case may be. But he's not the only one that doesn't really like to answer questions, that likes to circle back around, sidesteps everything. Jen Psaki. Oh, no, this isn't the right one. I'll have to pull it up. I know that Jen Psaki was asked about gas prices. Right here. This is the one. So she sneered at a reporter who asked if high gas prices are politically damaging. She said or okay, so the reporter said, on oil prices, you've alluded a couple of times today to the impact on what actual gas price is. I think it's over $3 a gallon now. Huge amount of travel over the holiday weekend. What is the president doing for regular Americans to try to keep the gas prices down, whether it be engaging with OPEC? But also, is the president considering releasing from the strategic reserve, or are there other steps that the president can take to address what is obviously a painful situation? And how much do you guys worry on his behalf that it will become a political issue that could be damaging to the president and his party in the coming election? In 18 months? 17 months? Okay, Psaki responded. So I would say first, Mike, that the president wants Americans to have access to affordable and reliable energy, including at the pump. And so that's why our team is constantly monitoring gas prices and directly communicating with OPEC parties to get a deal and allow proposed production increases to move forward. I was trying to talk like her. She says a lot of ums a lot. Sackett claimed that there were many times a misunderstanding of what causes gas prices to increase, even though gas prices are higher now under Biden than they ever were under former President Donald Trump. And so to convey to the American people that we're working on it, and certainly the supply availability of oil has a huge impact, I would also say that ensuring Americans don't bear a burden at the pump continues to be a top priority for the administration at large. That's one of the core reasons why the president was vehemently opposed, to a gas tax and a tax on vehicle mileage because he felt that would fall on the backs of Americans, and that was a bottom line red line for him. A bottom line red line? The heck kind of term is that? In terms of additional considerations, I just don't have anything to preview for you. Um, just one more quick one. OPEC Plus. It's in a statement yesterday that you guys are currently engaged with the various players, even though you're not a part of the negotiation. Can you elaborate a little bit on what that means? Sure. We are closely monitoring the OPEC Plus negotiations and their impact on the global economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. As you noted, Phil, we're not a party to these talks, but over the weekend and into this week, we've had a number of high level conversations with officials in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and other relevant partners. Oh, you mean where we now have to get our oil for gas because we shut down a main pipeline, which was a source for our own oil, for our own gas? Why would we do that? Oh, because we want to enrich these nations over our own. We are encouraged by the ongoing conversation by OPEC members to reaching an agreement. The ongoing talks, I should say, which will promote access to affordable and reliable energy, and certainly the impact on prices here is hence our great interest. Go ahead. So, can you tell us which administration officials have been engaging with Saudi and UAE governments on this issue? I don't have more details about the individuals. I can see if there's more specifics to provide for you after the briefing. I'll have to circle back to that. She didn't say that, I said that. And then on the U.S. engagement in the talks, I know that you said the U.S. isn't a party to the talks, but have these officials engaged or encouraged a specific solution, such as keeping production levels where they are currently through the end of the year? Well, I would say first, we are engaged directly with them to hear updates on the conversations that are happening between the OPEC members. I can see, of course, and we are constantly monitoring the price of gas in this country, and we know the impact of oil prices around the world is having a direct impact on that. In terms of additional specifics of the conversations, I'm just not going to have anything more to read out for you. And then lastly, just gauging the concern level here at the White House, is there any chance that President Biden would personally get involved in contacting these governments? I'm certainly not predicting that at this moment in time. We have a high level officials who are talented and aptly engaged with their counterparts, and I will see if there's more specifics we can provide about who the individuals are. Do you see how she never answers questions, really? Third reporter, two questions, one on the oil prices and one on COVID. On Okay, so we read this one already about the oil prices, and she gave her snide remarks. So that's it for that. So she doesn't ever answer questions. That's the problem. And we do have a major problem with gas prices. And they've increased 40% under Joe Biden. And they're going to get higher. So let's take a look at. Oh, Michael Knowles is streaming live right now. Let's take a look at what we could be looking forward to. Gas prices have skyrocketed under Democrat President Joe Biden, and analysts are warning Americans that their forecasts show that prices are going to keep surging for at least another several weeks. The national gas price average has increased 40% since the start of the year, from 2.25 on January 1st to 3.13 today. Moreover, it is not stopping there. Motorists can expect gas prices to increase another 10 to 20 cents through the end of August, bringing the national average well over 3.25 this summer. Jeanette McGee, AAA spokesperson, said that the surge in costs are in part due to negotiations falling through with OPEC, adding, as a result, crude prices are set to surge to a 7-year high. The last time crude was more than $76.40 and the national average gas price was at 3.25 was November and October of 2014 respectively. Remember, when Obama was in office, we also had very high gas prices. Prices for crude will exceed this threshold as early as today, and gas prices will follow suit in coming weeks, paving the way for a very expensive peak driving season. By as early as today, when was this written? Today. The latest weekly report from the Energy Information Administration shows that gasoline demand remains robust at 9.1 million B per D. I don't know what that means, despite a weekly decrease. EIA reports that gasoline stocks increased by 1.5 million BBL to 241 million BBL. See, I don't know any of that. I don't know what this is talking about. Last week. Since last Monday, the national average increased 4 cents and is more expensive on the month plus 8 cents and the year plus 95 cents. So, anybody who's watching this on YouTube, or even if you're listening in audio, if you know what all of that jargon was that I just read, comment below and explain it to me, please. AAA warned that Tropical Storm Elsa could cause disruptions to crude and gasoline production throughout the region. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki downplayed questions from reporters about surging fuel costs, as she also dismissed the notion that the prices would hurt the Democrat Party in the midterms. I'm not going to read all that because we already read that. So, I think it'll hurt the Democrats for sure because people don't want to pay that kind of gas. They can't afford it. It's ridiculous. our car that we used to be able to fill up for a little over $20, maybe $22, fill up a tank of gas, excuse me, now costs almost $45 to fill up. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I don't like it. It needs to stop. Um, so there was this story about a peeping Tom, and her father shot the peeping Tom that was peeping in on this little girl. The peeping Tom is facing charges. This is written by Charlotte Pence Bond. So, a man who was reportedly caught last month inappropriately touching himself while looking into a 10-year-old girl's window before allegedly trying to shoot her mother has been charged. Records show that the man, 44, is charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and indecency with a child by exposure. According to court documents, the girl's parents reported that their daughter alerted them to a man tapping on her window and touching himself. Oh my god, that's creepy! That just gave me the heebie jeebies reading that. Just thinking, like, what that little girl saw. Oh, ew. The document states the girl confirmed with authorities that she heard the tapping, felt like someone was watching her, went to the window, and saw the man looking at her. Oh, I'm just like picturing that image in my mind, and it creeps me out. Oh, the parents, armed with handguns, reportedly confronted the man outside and told him to wait for police, but he walked away and they followed, court documents state. The outlet continued. The sheriff's office reportedly said that the parents went after the man to a gas station where the wife held him as her husband went to ask an employee to call the police. At that time, the sheriff's office says, the man took the handgun from the wife and pointed it at her. According to court documents, the wife said that the man tried to fire the gun twice at her, but it was on safety mode. What an idiot. The sheriff's office said, per the outlet, that the husband then shot the man 3 times before he was taken to a hospital for treatment. When ABC 7's sister station, ABC 13, spoke to the father, he said he believed he shot the man 4 times, twice in the chest, once in the stomach, and once in the side. Fox News reported about the incident at the time, stating that authorities said that both the husband and wife are licensed handgun carriers. She looks over at the window and this guy is at her window, the girl's mother, who preferred not to be identified, told KPRC2 at the time. I can't say that he tried to take my daughter's innocence away. He took my daughter's innocence away. I'm literally saying you're not going anywhere, the mother said as she explained how the man was attempting to escape from the situation. He is wrestling with me with my gun, and I'm like, I'm not going to let you get my gun. You're not going to kill me or shoot me. My husband just said he heard a ka. What? But by the time the guy had already grabbed me, got my gun, and pulled it on myself. We didn't want this guy to get shot. We were waiting for police to detain him because I'm pretty sure if he did this to my children, he's doing it to a lot of other children out there. We are praying for the suspect, and we are also praying for his family. ABC7 reported at the time that the girl's father said his daughter had complained in the past about seeing someone watching her through the window, but the parents didn't believe her. The incident reportedly took place in northwest Harris County. Oh, so he had been doing this more than once and they didn't believe her. I mean, come on. If your kid comes and tells you, hey, I think someone's watching me through my window, wouldn't you at least look into that and make sure? Because why would they make something like that up? That seems weird to me. So, I that just seems really weird. Listen, the last thing I want to look at. I'm an avid reader. I love reading books or listening to them on Audible when I'm at work because I can't actually sit down and read. Listen, I think I am currently reading 6 books. I'm reading Michael Knowles' Speechless, Controlling Words, Controlling Minds. I'm reading a Christian book called Thy Kingdom Come. I'm listening on Audible to a book called The Bane Chronicles. It's fantasy. I am reading a book or 2 books on Kindle. A Shade of Vampire, Book 25, which I listened to books 1 through 24 on Audible, but they didn't have book 25. So I have to read that on Kindle. And I'm also reading a book called Taunter by Christopher Pike on Kindle. And then there's a book that a customer at work gave me, um, Little Black Book. It's a murder mystery. That's seven. Seven books. And I can remember what's going on in each of the books. It's not like I don't know what I'm talking about going into one book thinking it's this story, but it's something else. I know what the books are talking about. I can keep up. I love to read, and I really do. So I thought before I ended the episode, I wanted to look at 10 books that every conservative should read in 2021. Mostly because I think reading is just really good for people. So, I guess this is the first book, The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Are Divided on Religion and Politics by Jonathan Haidt. I don't know how to say that. He's a professor of social psychology at New York University. He's the founder of Heterodox Academy and a leader in the academic movement for ideological freedom. It takes on a nonpartisan stance as he examines the moral roots of political differences and illuminates the psychological underpinnings of modern conservatism and liberalism. Then you have The Case Against Socialism by Rand Paul. I didn't know he wrote a book. Okay. Um, so a whopping 43% of Americans believe that more socialism would be a good thing. So Paul's book arms concerned citizens with a slew of arguments against common misconceptions about socialism, drawing from an extensive body of historical evidence and economic theory. It amounts to a destruction of this utopian idealism with hard-hitting truth. Number 3, 1984 by George Orwell. Now listen, I've read this. Well, I listened to it on Audible, and it was amazing. But one thing that I learned about George Orwell and Michael Knowles' books is that George Orwell was against like tyranny and totalitarianism, but he believed in socialism, at least in the way he understood it. He did not understand socialism as the collective, as tribalism. He still believed there should be individuals. So I would assume he kind of looked at it the way that you might look at like Denmark, where they're a capitalist system with a socialist safety net, right? They have socialist programs. We have socialist programs. Food stamps, Medicaid, those are all socialist safety nets. So I think that's how he kind of sees things, but done better, maybe. Anyway, it topped Amazon's bestsellers this past year. Um, so it is among the most persuasive critics of authoritarianism. And although most of us likely read this book in high school, it is well worth a revisit today. I didn't. I did not read it. But as authoritarian leftist ideology continues to rise, the story also reflects the sensation of thought criminality many conservatives and libertarians feel today. So, the one thing that I will tell you that he did get wrong is the state being able to control people by suppressing people's pleasures of doing certain things. Um, they don't allow you to enjoy anything, and it keeps you oppressed. He got that wrong because that is not how they are trying to control us from top down. They tried to control us in the same way. And what's funny about this is Huxley, who wrote Brave New World, was George Orwell's teacher. So they both wrote books about the same thing, but they both had different ideas of how the state was going to gain control of the people. So Orwell thought it was going to be taking away people's pleasure and not being able to do things, but Huxley knew that it was going to be allowing people to give in to their lust and the pleasures of that hedonism, and they would be able to control you through that because you would be so engulfed in all of this stuff, you would have no way to, you'd be so bogged down with everything that you're getting into that you can't step out of it and actually fight for your freedom and your independence, if that makes sense. I have not read Brave New World yet, but I do know what it's about, so I intend to read it. Number 4, How to Have Impossible Conversations, a very practical guide by Peter Boghossian, I guess, and James Lindsay. University of Portland professor of philosophy Peter Boghossian, I don't know how to say his name, um, joins forces with notable cultural critic and Twitter provocateur James Lindsay in this guide to navigating treacherous conversations. So, there's that one. They talk about grievance studies affairs and cynical theories, how activist scholarship made everything about race, gender, and identity, and why this harms everybody. Number 5, Springtime for Snowflakes, Social Justice and Its Postmodern Parentage by Michael Rectenwald. So he's a professor of liberal studies at New York University and the infamous anti PCNYU professor on Twitter. Dr. Rectenwald accessibly traces the ideological roots of woke culture. He's a former Marxist turned libertarian critic of political correctness. He cleverly weaves together a first person narrative from his perspective as a red pilled convert in academia with a philosophical reflection on the postmodernist movement and its manifestations in modern leftism. Number 6, Unlearning Race, Self-Portrait in Black and White by Thomas Chatterton Williams. So he's a cultural critic and New York Times Magazine contributor. Um, he was behind Harper's Magazine letter standing against cancel culture. So he explores his own racial identity as a mixed race American living in France and ultimately concludes that the only way forward is a rejection of critical race theory and neo racist identity politics in favor of a reclamation of our common humanity. Good. 7. A Conflict of Visions, Ideological Origins of Power Struggles by Thomas Sowell, legendary economist and social theorist. He's an author of over 30 books. So, at 90 years old, Sowell was truly a fixture of the modern libertarian and conservative movements. He serves as a senior fellow at the Hoover Institute. So, it explains the root differences between liberals and conservatives, paying particular attention to conflicting views on the role of government. Um, Number 8, The Madness of Crowds, Gender, Race, and Identity by Douglas Murray. He's a British author and political commentator. His best-selling book was The Madness of Crowds, right? Um, this book chronicles the rise of woke culture and divisive identity politics, taking on societal misconceptions surrounding race, gender, and sexuality, with interludes on the cultural impacts of technology and Marxist theory. Number 9, I think I'm on number 9. The Parasitic Mind: How Infectious Ideas Are Killing Common Sense by Gad Saad. Gad Saad, okay. A Lebanese Canadian evolutionary psychologist and professor of marketing at Concordia University, he provides a timely perspective from inside academia. He examines the corrosive ideologies eclipsing Western ideals of logic, reason, and free speech. 12 Rules for Life: An Antidote to Chaos. This is a book I really want to read. It's by Jordan Peterson. Great guy. I love listening to him talk. He's a Canadian clinical psychologist, a professor of psychology at the University of Toronto, and a cultural thought leader. Drawing from psychology, mythology, biology, and religion, Peterson sets forth 12 principles for conducting oneself and leading a productive and fulfilling life. So, that's not 10 books, was it? Yeah, it was. Okay, that was 10 books. I can't count. So I would highly suggest definitely reading 1984, and Jordan Peterson's book because he's really, really great guy. And go read Michael Knowles' book, Speeches, Controlling Words, Controlling Minds. But don't forget, you don't have to always read something that you're going to learn something from. You can take the time to read something that kind of takes you out of reality and gives you a little bit of a break. That's totally fine. Because that's why I like to read. I like to just escape for a minute. So there's nothing wrong with that. Anyway, that's it for today. I just thought it'd be interesting to share some books, some that I've read, some that I am reading, and I encourage you to go read. Get off social media for a while. Go read. Don't watch TV. I'll be sitting there and I'll be watching something on YouTube, and I'll turn it off for a second, even in the middle of it. And I did this the other day, and um I was watching Jacksepticeye play a game, and I just shut it off in the middle of it and just started reading my book because I'm like, at some point I need to read. I can't just watch YouTube all day today. And most of the time when I read, it's when I'm at work, when I have a break, when I'm not doing anything, or when I'm listening to it while I'm working. That's most of the reading time that I'm allowed to get in. Um, because, I mean, I could do it on the days that I'm off, but there's other things I want to do too. I want to rest, I want to relax, I want to watch something because I don't watch TV while I'm at work. So, you know, uh, it's a balance. You got to make time for everything. And I've also started today. I'm going to start doing um a Bible devotion. It's a 7-day thing. Um, and I can't remember what the name of the little thing was, but it's on YouVersion, and they have a lot of different little Bible devotions you can do for so many days. Some are like a week, some are 2 weeks, some are 30 days. You can plan out Bible reading to read through the Bible in an entire year. Um, I read through the entire Bible and it took 8 months. Doesn't take a year. You can do it quicker. Um, but if you read it that fast, you may not pick up on everything. I read it that way because I just wanted to read through the entire Bible at least once in my lifetime because I'd never done it. Every time I'd set out to do it, I would always have to start over because I would inevitably fall out of it and quit reading it. So I completed that, and now my intention is to read through the Bible every year. But you have to slow down, and this is actually going to be a time to read it and study it rather than just read it for the sake of reading it to say, well, I have read the Bible all the way through. But I wanted to read the Bible all the way through because I'd never done that. I read things in the Bible that I'd never read and learned about things that even going to church, I've never heard people preach on it. So I wanted to do that. I encourage you to do that too. Aside from your books, take time to read your Bible too. That's what the daily devotion is for, to set out a time, carve out a time during the day to make sure I get my Bible reading in before I do anything else. So, I hope you have a good rest of the day. I didn't intend to go on a spiel about reading, but I think it's really good for us to do that. So, have a good rest of your day. Please go join my Facebook, Lauren Collins. I just gotta say something. You can always email me, gotta say something 21 at gmail.com. You can join my subreddit at r/ just gotta say something. And you can find me on Audible, not on Audible, on audio only platforms, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Anchor, where all of those podcasts are available, Pandora. And then, of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, please comment, like, subscribe to the channel, share the video. It would really mean a lot to me. Um, and I do appreciate the support. I really do. Thank you to everybody that supports me. Anyway, I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I hope to have you back here tomorrow. Have a good day, and God bless.